Hello and welcome to our next and final episode of 2020 of When Tomorrow Comes. Once again, I'm your chair for today. I'm Charlotte Orrell and I'm the Senior Futures Consultant in the Iceni Futures team. Now, we're regurgitating some of the messages that we've had through email, vlog, the rare occasion in person. It's been a fascinating and challenging year, but it has also provided us with a wealth of opportunities. And when we first started the vlog back in March, we weren't really sure where it would be going, but 9 months later, we're still here. We've kept some of the changes that we've made and we are set to continue into the new year. So what the vlog's demonstrated is the positivity that has remained throughout the period, the barriers, the solutions that the pandemic has provided, and to be honest, how quickly the built environment has been to adapt to some of these issues. So this week we are keeping on that theme, and since the start of the pandemic, I remember back to the first few days in March and April of us asking what the new normal for working would look like once the tears have gone, the lockdowns are a distant memory. And my colleague from the planning team this week, Lewis Wastoff, joins us after writing a very interesting piece on what the future of the office market might look like. So thank you for joining us, Lewis.
That's good to be here.
Thank you. And I'm also joined and welcomed by Dan Jessico from the Futures teams, as always, for his input today. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Charlotte.
And whilst we have tracked and we are advising on the office market, some of us have been slightly more proactive in responding in their own office models. And today I am pleased to welcome one of those people. And so welcome, Basil, from For Partnership.
Hi, good to be here. Thank you for having me.
So Lewis, do you mind starting us off with a summary of your article, which you did last week, and some of the key points from within that?
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte. Sure. I was kind of reflecting after a difficult 9 months since the lockdown and the pandemic about how we work. So I was one of those people before COVID where I was, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 in the office, kind of full time, and working from home or sort of flexible working was something I never really did. But obviously that's changed quite a bit because of COVID, and I was sort of thinking ahead to what 2021 means when the vaccine rollout comes as well, and we kind of go to this new sort of hybrid way of working, because I think lots of us would probably agree that the Monday to Friday 9 to 5 in the office is probably dead, and it's going to go to very much a flexible way of working where we sort of spend a mixture of time working from home and working from the office. So I was sort of thinking about what that means. In my article, I was just looking at a couple of interesting statistics about this rise of hybrid working, where they think that the vast majority of the workforce is going to be favouring a hybrid approach, which is obviously the mix between home and office working. And it got me thinking about what that means for our offices. What does it mean in terms of where our offices are located? What does it mean in terms of the way we use our offices and the way they're fitted out, and what's going to entice us there? And I was looking at a sort of a few different examples. And the first example was just kind of comparing and contrasting the Square Mile in the City of London versus, say, the West End, because I think, we've all kind of been on bike rides or sort of gone for sort of walks around the city over the last few months. And when you go into the city, it's still very much in a slumber. It's starting to kind of awaken slowly, but it's still very, very quiet. Whereas when you go across to the West End, it still has quite a bit of vibrancy there. And for me, one of the big differences there is the mix of uses and sort of the finer grain kind of uses there versus the city, which has very large, kind of tall, kind of mono-use buildings. So I was thinking, is the city ever going to come out of its slumber? Is there going to be a bit more of a push towards kind of smaller offices? And that kind of got me thinking about, what's going to entice us back? Is it going to be about location and amenities? And is a day in the office going to be one of those days where when you do go back in, it's going to be a day where you have a lunch or you're going to have some drinks after work, and therefore the best offices should be located in the areas where you have those amenities around them. So that was one thing I was thinking about. And another one as well that a few of our clients have been asking us questions about too is there going to be a bit of a rise in neighbourhood located sort of workspaces too? So rather than sort of your zone 1 locations, there are quite a few good sort of transport hubs in sort of zones 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. That probably have cheaper rents, but those locations have all the amenities on their doorsteps too. So is there going to be a bit more of a push or an interest in towards people going towards new office space sort of out of the sort of the central location. So yeah, I was just kind of posing a few questions really about what it all means. And yeah, I think 2021 is going to be a better year than this year. But I'm actually quite intrigued just to see what it means for the way we work.
Thanks, Lewis. Basil, do you want to do a little bit of an intro? And I appreciate there's a lot within Lewis's article and what he's just said, but I don't know whether you want to pick up on a couple of those points with what you're doing at the moment. And do you really think traditional ways of working are dead, as Lewis says?
Great. Well, again, thanks for having me. I'm Basil Demarudis, and I'm managing partner of 4 Partnerships. So we're an investor in the space. We're a real estate investment management firm active in the UK and also a little bit on the continent, focused on offices and a bit in the living sector. I think the key theme about our investment approach is really around environmental sustainability and social impact. So we're an ESG-driven investor, and that's not to say that we're sacrificing returns for sort of psychic income or for other benefits, but really we see ESG trends and values and things that we implement on the ESG front in buildings as being a driver of long-term financial outperformance, actually. And I think we can all hopefully now agree that with the last 18 months and certainly the last 9 months, that ESG as a narrative is really risen to the top of the pile and is an important story for occupiers and investors alike. And I think will be the dominant narrative as we go forward in this next decade. Yeah, there was a lot to chew on, Lewis, in your remarks there. I think one thread really running through it is really what's the office for? And I mean, it's a question really we've been asking anytime anyone would be willing to listen to us over these last 8 years that we've been in business is why do we go to the office? We've had the office in our pockets in the form of a phone for the last 7, 8 decade. So used to be that we would go to the office because it was a convenient aggregator of infrastructure. You know, the first fax machine, the big computers, the big photocopiers. These were unavailable to people in the home in any other context other than in the workspace. So we don't have that anymore. So what's been drawing us there? And I think we need to really quickly answer that question if you haven't already been answering it as an occupier or an investor, and come up with a thesis. It may not be right, but at least you need to be have a story and an answer to that question that's sound. Because I think without that, you're really just going to be treading water for the next foreseeable future. From our perspective, I think we've seen over the last period of 9 months of various lockdowns and constraints on actually coming to the office. I think initially there was this like euphoria of liberation. But I think we've also recognized that there is some sort of magic that only can happen in the office when people come together. It's around the fact that we're social animals, and I think a lot has been discussed about the need to come together for collaboration and brainstorming, for career development, for progression, mentorship. All of these things I think can only happen when we're physically together. As great as these tools like Zoom are, they're ultimately two-dimensional, and we think in a three-dimensional world, and we miss so much when we're not physically in the same space together. So I think the office, in that context, the office needs to change and needs to adapt to those sort of interactions, and to make those interactions as fruitful, as beneficial, and as positive as they possibly can. And I think finally, just we need to make the office actually a better alternative for people than home. So we've just redone our own office, for example, and believe it or not, we've sort of doubled down on the concept of office in our own lives. But we've made sure we've got a better coffee machine that you have at home, a more comfortable sofa, a bigger TV, better air flow, better environment, better access to things that'll keep you fit and healthy. And I think that's the way that we also get people back to the office. It needs to be better than the alternative.
So rather than me sitting in my kitchen, you mean? At least I've got access to the fridge.
Yeah.
It's absolutely right. I mean, about 40 years ago, people were starting to talk about sick building syndrome. That's when offices were kind of very, I wouldn't even say sterile, but just empty boxes, really, just had people in it, very poor air quality, very poor internal environments, bad lighting, bad access to daylight. And we've since come on a sort of escalator where internal office environments are not just kind of seen to be not damaging to your health, but they now have to be inspiring as well. So for you to get the best kind of inspire you to collaborate with your colleagues. And that really needs careful attention paid to the environmental design of the space, to the interior fit out, to the materials you're using, as well as the sort of layout. So, you know, that what Basil's saying about the office being a place where people come together to collaborate now needs to actively encourage that collaboration and make sure that you're getting the best out of people, which is why sort of the health and wellbeing agenda, even without COVID, was kind of rising up people's priority list. And it's now critical to get that right.
Do you think there's a locational element of this? Because obviously Lewis picked up on sort of local hubs. Do you think there is a preferred location for offices now? Do you think your model and having everything there, having your good coffee machine, having your sports facilities on site, do you think that works in the burbs, or do you think that's a model that's most suited to a city?
I think there's a good argument for the distributed model, and I think you'll see the rise of sub-markets like Hammersmith or other markets, north, south, east, west. And I do worry a little bit about the city. I think it is, Lewis says, a bit like a monolithic, one-size-fits-all approach, and I'm not sure how easy that is to adapt to the new models. I think the biggest challenge for a place like the city is frankly the commute. You might be able to adopt and adapt the individual space in which your office is, but I think at the end of the day, I think transportation and commuting is going to be a big challenge for people to overcome. That they won't soon forget about the damage caused by the pandemic.
That's why I was sort of picking up on that sort of neighborhood workspace idea as well, because I don't know if the three of you have sort of noticed this too, but one of the things I've noticed during lockdown is in sort of Hackney where I live, sort of the high streets and the town centres are absolutely booming. Everyone's walking there, everyone's supporting the local businesses and everything like that for that exact reason, as you mentioned, Basil. Don't have to jump on a train or jump on a bus and everything like that. And that was just one of the things I was thinking about. You know, I think there probably still would be a place for the city and what it does. It's a very important kind of global sort of financial centre for one. But will there be sort of smaller businesses who would sort of traditionally maybe try and get into that city postcode, and now they say, well, postcode, don't really worry about that anymore. I just want to have the easy commute where I can cycle or walk to work. So that's what I'm just intrigued to see what will happen if some of those sort of smaller and medium-sized businesses decide to maybe relocate out of the city for that reason about the commute.
Yeah, and look, I think at a deeper level, I think we've all also reconnected with our local communities, haven't we? I'm on like 5 WhatsApp groups of my neighborhood. I'm like many people in London. I didn't even know our neighbors. There's some statistics that have come out recently that we've unearthed something like 75% of people don't even know the name of the person who lives next door to them. And I have to put my hand up saying I'm probably guilty of that. But reconnecting with the neighborhood community, feeling a sense of connectedness in this incredibly disconnected, dysfunctional situation we find ourselves in is really grounding. And I think that's something that we've rediscovered. And I think that's going to be a difficult one to give up.
Well, I mean, I think that the concept of social value can be equally transferred into these local neighbourhood hubs, because essentially what you're doing is, instead of spending your commuting money sort of going into central London and buying sandwiches and everything like that around there, your social value actually comes in your spending power and the development outside of big financial centres. So in terms of levelling up, you're actually doing a much better job at distributing sort of income in different parts of London. So it's not all centred in the centre of London. You know, it gets distributed around to cafes, to establishments, to small independent businesses, sandwich shops, cafes. where you probably wouldn't normally spend money. So in terms of the actual social value of distributed workspace, there's a real positive story to be told in engaging with your local communities and getting sort of other support and ancillary services involved in the work environment.
It'd be interesting to see how planning responds, because of course it's not just us and be it investors or others working in the sector. We're dependent on a compliant planning regime as well.
Do you have a specific ask from planning? Have you come across any particular barriers where you're finding you can't provide the product that you want? Or is there a way you want planning to go to allow you in, say, 3 to 5 years' time to provide a new model?
Well, I think as an investor, I think anytime we're investing in these communities and these where there's mixed use, I think again I would totally agree with Dan and Lewis that that has to be a better model as opposed to these monolithic kind of structures. So, but when you're putting offices next to residents, next to leisure, next to whatever it may be, food and beverage. It's a clash of culture sometimes, and so and planners ultimately are beholden to voters, and voters are residents, and residents usually have a pretty loud voice. So I think there needs to be a sympathetic collaboration amongst all of the stakeholder groups, and a recognition that actually bringing this kind of mixed use development in the way that has been described here is actually beneficial ultimately to communities, to thriving communities, and brings substantial social and economic value.
Yeah, because just picking up on that point you were mentioning, Shard, I think Class E, since the use class order change that came in early this year, is going to be really important for that too, because you've got some of those sort of town centres that might be struggling a little bit, and if people are looking at going in those more local centres, then that's hopefully a perfect way they can get in there without any of those planning barriers, because it's not development to change from a shop to an office now, which I think will hopefully help that.
Yeah, and even in sustainability terms, designing buildings to be flexible is kind of a really easy win, because if you've got a space where it's ultimately flexible, then it's designed for a variety of uses. Your building doesn't become obsolete. You can just incorporate and adapt to those changes as the market requires. So designing things to be specifically offices or specifically retail just needs to kind of be part. We just need to design buildings to be buildings, and they can be flexible enough to be used however the market deems appropriate. That's the most sustainable way we can build them.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, I'm conscious of time, so one last question, and I'm going to put this to Lewis and Basil. We've obviously, in a sense, speak about where we hope the office is going to go within the next sort of year, so let's say 5, but where do you see it going beyond that? Or where would you like to see it going beyond that? Once we're settled, once we're over the pandemic, feeling more secure, what would you like to see?
I mean, I think the office can be a rich and dynamic place and a positive contributor to culture, intellectual knowledge base of society, the economy, obviously. So I think far from it being dead, I think we're about to enter a golden age for the office. If we can open our minds to what the office looks like and what its function can be and should be. There is a tremendous amount of work to do out there, because 90%, 95% of offices are not fit for purpose and are not in the kind of design and framework has been described here. Both from a design and kind of functionality standpoint, we haven't even touched on environmental sustainability. So there is a huge amount of work to do. So I suppose in 5 years' time, I'd like to see us have grabbed onto this, seen the opportunity, and have really started to make some dynamic, exciting changes in the way we think about workspace.
Yeah, I'd agree probably with everything Basil said too. I think the only thing I'll sort of add too is I heard someone say, I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard someone say that the Great Depression was the real catalyst for the Monday to Friday 9 to 5 working day, sort of the 40-hour week, and that was obviously a huge disruption back then, and this has obviously been a massive disruption now. So historically, when we look back at this sort of moment in time in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, will this be the rise of sort of flexible working and the hybrid way of working? And I think it definitely will. And I think in 5 years' time, the office is going to have a very, very important role to play in the way we work and the way we do business. But for me, I kind of see it becoming more of as a hub, and as Basil mentioned before, it's having the better coffee machine, the better sofa, the better TV, all of that sort of stuff too. But I think people will be using offices less for probably sitting there and writing reports and doing that, and more for a place of collaboration and socializing. So having meetings, seeing your colleagues, and using it as a bit of a hub to go out for, you know, those after work drinks or the lunch or whatever like that. So yeah, I think it's exciting times ahead.
Thanks, Lewis, and thank you all for your insights for the year ahead and beyond. I have to admit, I'm personally looking forward to getting back into the office in the new year again, seeing some of your faces. That's if obviously you want to see me. Basil, thank you for joining us. Really interesting to hear from you, and good luck with your ambitions in the year ahead. And for those of you listening, thank you for checking in. I hope you all have a very good festive period, whatever that might now look like. And I hope you will join us again in the new year.